Daisy is pregnant. Can you give me a divorce? I was at a loss for words, unable to speak. My sister, Daisy, was gently caressing her belly with a serene expression. At that moment, I didn't know what kind of face I had. I couldn't see myself in a mirror, so I have no idea. But my husband, Thomas, stood protectively in front of Daisy, as if to shield her. Maybe I looked really scary. Did he think I was going to lose my mind and attack her? I stood there, speechless, staring at Thomas, who was trying to protect Daisy and their unborn child.
You must be joking, right? Daisy is my sister. Why? I don't understand.
We've been seeing each other since we were separated. I'm sorry about that. But the words that followed were a pathetic excuse. Thomas claimed that because I couldn't have children, the problem was solely with me. He said it was better for him to start a new family with Daisy than to continue being childless with me. Don't drag me into your misery. This is the only way for both of us to be happy. We were supposed to be a married couple. Wasn't our inability to have children a problem for both of us? And now, it felt like even the memories of our early days together were being denied. Even though we didn't have children, there were plenty of times when I felt genuinely happy. I felt dizzy. I might collapse right there. I desperately tried to keep my legs steady, but my body felt heavy, and I leaned against the wall. I can't take it anymore. My name is Holly. I quit my job when I got married and have been a housewife for a long time. My husband, Thomas, works as a systems engineer, often working late into the night since he was young. With all the overtime and weekend work, it was difficult for him to share the housework, so I did almost all of it. Well, it's only natural since I'm a housewife. Thomas never talks about his work with me. His job involves maintaining network systems for a major bank, and it's too complicated for me to understand. Thomas probably thinks that explaining it to me wouldn't gain any sympathy, so he seems resigned. When he comes home tired from work, I want him to relax as much as possible. With that in mind, I prepare dinner and ask him how his day was. Holly, you wouldn't understand. It's too much trouble to explain. Too much trouble, he said dismissively. He never comments on the meals I make and always leaves the dishes on the table when he's done. His attitude seems to look down on my role as a housewife. I always see a slightly unhappy expression on his face as he walks away. But I know who he enjoys talking to. The doorbell rings, and Thomas rushes to the door.
Hey, Thomas. Holly, I'm coming in.
My sister, Daisy, comes in with a big smile. While I was boiling water in the kitchen, the two of them were already sitting at the table, looking through brochures and talking. The clock was about to strike midnight. Even at this late hour, Daisy didn't look tired at all. Daisy works as an insurance sales agent. She came over today to renew our health insurance. Daisy, wearing a crisp white blouse and a black skirt with creases, is 15 years younger than me and feels more like a daughter. I feel a deep sense of pride in her for leading a respectable life as an adult. After explaining the insurance details carefully to Thomas, Daisy stood up to leave with a grateful smile. Thank you for coming all the way, Daisy. Please come visit us during the day next time.
Yes. Thank you. See you later, Holly.
Thomas watched from the doorway until the door was completely closed. While he had a smile on his face in front of Daisy, now he was sitting on the sofa with a sullen expression. What changed about the insurance policy? Daisy is amazing. She is so pleasant and explains the coverage perfectly. You should learn from her, Holly. Daisy has always been good at dealing with people. So, what about the insurance? I'm too tired to explain. Read it yourself. Thomas got up from the sofa, handed me the brochure Daisy brought, and headed for the shower. What the heck? He could have explained it to me. I opened the brochure but couldn't understand the coverage details. There are so many types of insurance, and I couldn't tell which ones we contracted. He comes home late at night and leaves early in the morning. I don't think our marriage is bad, but I do feel we are drifting apart. One day, Thomas's dad, Gordon, got injured. While pruning the garden, he slipped off the ladder and fell on his back. He hurt his waist and became bedridden, so I had to take care of him. Originally, Gordon lived alone, but we brought him to our house to care for him. Gordon and I get along somehow. He used to be the head of a department at a city hall in a major urban area. He amassed considerable wealth through his efforts, is well educated, and has a gentle demeanor. Even though he's over 80, he still takes care of his appearance, with his neat silver hair combed back. Gordon suggested hiring a helper, but Thomas opposed it. From his perspective, it would be a waste to spend the savings that would eventually become his inheritance. He explained this to me when he wasn't around. I asked Thomas to help with the caregiving from time to time. Caregiving is physical labor, and there were tasks I couldn't manage alone due to my slight build. Thomas was initially grateful, but recently he has been indifferent. Since I have to care for Gordon every day, Thomas said to me, dressed in my casual attire, "Why don't you try looking more feminine?" I felt a surge of anger. I can't be bothered with that. Besides, can you help with Gordon's rehab and massage? Okay. Geez. It's a hassle. In the end, Thomas never entered Gordon's room. Even though I repeatedly asked him to visit Gordon, he ignored me. With Thomas not showing up. Thomas seems to be very busy with work. I apologized to Gordon. Holly, it's not your fault. Thank you for everything. Gordon's kind words pierced my heart. I also received strange emails from Daisy. Apparently, she somehow misunderstood and exaggerated the situation, saying I was forcing Thomas to take care of Gordon. She accused me harshly. Our relationship worsened, and so did my relationship with Thomas. Originally, Thomas used to come home just to sleep, but recently, he's been staying overnight at the office more and more often. Still, until Thomas came home, I would just sit in the living room, staring at the cold dinner, waiting for him absent-mindedly. It's been a year since I started caring for Gordon. Finally, Thomas declared that he wouldn't be coming back home anymore. He told me he had rented an apartment and took some clothes and left. Thomas packed his clothes into the large suitcase we had bought during our honeymoon, when we were so excited about our first overseas trip together. Remember that suitcase? Huh? Oh, this big suitcase. It's been in storage forever, but I finally found a use for it. When we first used that suitcase, we were so happy together. But now, what is he packing into that suitcase? Thomas said, "See ya," and left the house. Officially, the reason for our separation was that his work at the company was too busy, and he didn't want to trouble his dad and me by coming home late. Separation, I thought under the kitchen exhaust fan. Before I could feel lonely or sad, I just thought, of course. I had always thought this day would come. Thomas and I don't have children. We both treated that topic like it was taboo, never speaking of it. We both wanted children. I can't imagine Thomas beside me in my old age. As a housewife with no income, I had nowhere to go. Now, the caregiving life has entered its 5th year. At first, when we started living apart, Thomas would occasionally come home to get his things, but recently that had stopped, and our conversations had completely ceased. Despite that, Thomas came home without any warning. It had been 3 years since I last faced him properly. He seemed to have gained a bit of weight. For some reason, Daisy was with him, standing in the entrance without even taking off her shoes. At that moment, I hadn't seen Thomas and Daisy for a long time, and I never imagined they would make such a significant confession. Daisy is pregnant. Will you divorce me? I was at a loss for words and couldn't speak. Daisy was gently stroking her belly with a calm and kind expression. I don't know what kind of face I was making at that moment. I didn't look in the mirror. But Thomas stood in front of Daisy, as if to protect her. Maybe I looked very frightening. Did he think I would go berserk and attack her? I stared at Thomas and Daisy, dumbfounded, as Thomas tried to protect Daisy and the baby.
Are you kidding? Daisy is my sister. Why? I don't understand.
I've been seeing Daisy since we started living apart. I feel bad about it, but what followed was a miserable excuse. We didn't have any children together. Thomas argued that the reason we didn't have children was entirely my fault. He claimed that building a new family with Daisy, who could bear children, was better than staying childless with me. Don't drag me into your unhappiness. The only way for both of us to be happy is this. We were supposed to be a married couple. Wasn't the inability to have children our problem? And it felt like even the memories of our newlywed days, when we spent time together, were being denied. Even without children. I had so many moments when I felt completely happy. I felt dizzy. I almost collapsed on the spot. I desperately put strength into my legs, but my body felt heavy, and I leaned against the wall. It's no use, it's over. No matter what I say now, Thomas is determined to push for our divorce. The weight of the new life growing inside Daisy undoubtedly strengthens Thomas's resolve. Okay, then you'll take care of your dad.
Hey, wait a minute. That's a different matter.
His voice suddenly rises in volume. With a slightly strained smile, he crosses his arms exaggeratedly. That's a different matter, don't you think? After 5 years of caregiving, do you think it's ethically right to just give up now? Ethically, what does that even mean? If we divorce, what will my relationship with Gordon be? You'll take care of Dad. If you don't agree to this, you can forget about getting any alimony after the divorce. Thomas knows he's making an unreasonable demand, and it's clear in his tone. I can imagine Daisy, standing behind him with a gentle smile, encouraging Thomas to say this. I stare at Daisy's profile. She doesn't look at me, she just gently strokes her belly. Anyway, we're here today to talk about managing the inheritance with Dad. He's in the back room, right? I can't help but sigh. A deep, deep sigh that feels like it's emptying my chest. It's impossible, because Gordon. I falter, struggling to find the words. Thinking back, I knew they were coming to our house today. I even anticipated they'd announce the pregnancy and push for the divorce. But I naively thought it couldn't really happen. Thomas and Daisy give me puzzled looks as I fall silent. That's enough, Holly. You must have seen their true colors by now. Standing in the hallway where we'd been talking, Gordon appears with steady steps. Wearing a neatly pressed shirt and with his hair carefully combed. Thomas, who'd heard Gordon was bedridden, looks shocked.
Dad, since when could you walk like that?
Thanks to Holly's devoted care, I'm now able to get up and about. Gordon began to walk again about 3 years into my caregiving. At first, he used a cane, struggling to walk. But without giving up, he pushed his body, continuing his rehabilitation. Now, he can walk on his own, a recovery that has even astonished his doctors, who call it a near miracle. Gordon often thanks me for my dedication, but I believe it's due to his own efforts. He had been suspicious of Thomas and Daisy's relationship for quite some time. He happened to come home late one night and overheard Thomas talking to a woman. He heard the name Daisy. When Gordon first confided this to me, I couldn't believe it. The idea that my husband was having an affair with my own sister was unthinkable. No, perhaps I didn't want to believe it. When Thomas stopped coming home, Gordon apologized to me with deep remorse, something I still remember vividly.
Thomas. Holly never believed it, even when I hired investigators and showed her the evidence. She believed in you until the very end.
I see. Well, with Dad's condition improving, you must be relieved, Holly. You're free from caregiving now. Gordon looked at Thomas with a pitying gaze, then glanced at Daisy, who was hiding behind him. When Daisy noticed Gordon's gaze, she twisted her expression, covered her mouth with her hand, and looked down.
I was considering showing you some mercy if you agreed to take over my care. But since you're drowning in greed and being swayed by a young woman, I won't leave you a single cent of the inheritance.
Swayed by a young woman? No, that's not true. This is my own decision.
Thomas!
The stern voice, surprisingly resonant for an 89-year-old, echoed from the depths of his being. There was another reason why I didn't want to believe Thomas was cheating. It was because as a housewife, I had no guarantee of financial stability after a divorce. No matter how much evidence Gordon presented of Thomas's infidelity, divorce wasn't an option for me. If I got divorced, I wouldn't be able to support myself. Even if I demanded alimony in a divorce trial, I didn't have the confidence to re-enter the workforce after years of being a housewife. However, Gordon offered me some suggestions. Before pushing for a divorce, he suggested I try working at a company he knew. I was good at managing household finances, but I never thought that skill could translate into a job. Gordon encouraged me to study bookkeeping. He facilitated my entry into a reputable company with excellent job conditions and leave policies, giving me the skills and confidence to live independently.
Holly is no longer at your beck and call. She has become a strong, independent woman.
I couldn't help but look at his profile. Gentle and soft-spoken, Gordon was now fervently standing up for me. I had always felt dependent on Thomas. That feeling was quietly dissipating, as if a weight was being lifted off my shoulders. Thomas, initially taken aback, soon sneered at me.
Did you seduce Dad, Holly?
What?
Hiring an investigator to gather evidence, waiting to pounce on me. Learning job skills to meticulously prepare for divorce. You and Dad working together like a pair of con artists.
Thomas was the one who first mentioned divorce. Now, feeling cornered, he started hurling baseless accusations at Gordon and me. I had tolerated his infidelity until Daisy got pregnant, and for that, I was also to blame. Went so far as to accuse Gordon of failing as a parent for investigating his own son's affair and encouraging divorce. Thomas, now foaming at the mouth in his agitated state.
Not leaving any inheritance? Don't be ridiculous, Dad. Think about it rationally. That's right. Gordon.
Daisy, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. She gently caressed her belly, smiling sweetly and confidently.
Gordon is going to be a grandpa soon. Isn't this your first grandchild? Surely you want to leave some money for this child's future? This unborn child is innocent. And maybe they're listening to our conversation right now.
Daisy's voice was gentle, but her words carried a playful tone as she caressed her belly.
Or do you have someone else in mind to make you a grandpa, Gordon?
Daisy, stop it already.
Don't you know that if a couple doesn't have children within 3 years of marriage, they should get divorced? Stop playing the victim. It's Holly who's been tormenting Thomas all along.
At that moment, I couldn't help but look at Gordon. Gordon was looking back at me. I think we both have the same feelings reflected in our eyes. Daisy is my younger sister. A much younger, adorable sister. I thought I wouldn't get hurt no matter what she said to me, and I didn't mind if she insulted me. But, if Daisy can't discern what should and shouldn't be said to people, then I have to teach her thoroughly here and now. I have to make her understand who is responsible for this mess. I returned to the living room. I have another set of documents that I had investigated by a private investigator. This one details not Thomas's infidelity, but an in-depth investigation into Daisy's background. I hold out the documents to Daisy. Daisy and Thomas look at the documents suspiciously, saying, "What is this?" Daisy, who was smiling serenely and confidently just a moment ago, starts to tremble. Several photos are sandwiched between the documents. In them, Daisy is seen with various men, smiling and looking happy. Daisy, were you cheating on me with other men too?
No. I wasn't cheating. These photos are just...
Her hands shake, causing the documents to fall. The photos scatter on the floor, more than just a few. Seeing the numerous two-shot photos with different men, Thomas gasps. Daisy frantically kneels down, desperately trying to gather the photos. It's all a lie, isn't it? We know everything now. Gordon speaks to Daisy as if admonishing her. Summarizing the investigation results, it goes like this. Daisy was an excellent insurance salesperson. She seemed flawless at first glance. However, it turned out that she engaged in sexual bribery to secure insurance contracts. Eventually, one of the client's wives found out and sued her. Once one lawsuit was filed, rumors spread in the apartment complex where the client lived. Daisy had multiple clients in that complex, and the news of her affairs quickly spread, leading to more wives joining forces to sue her. She faced multiple lawsuits and had to pay substantial divorce settlements. In her desperate situation, Daisy devised this pregnancy scheme. Daisy, you're not pregnant. You tricked Thomas into marrying you to get his inheritance, didn't you?
No.
Of course, it's not true. I stare at Daisy. When I first learned that Thomas's affair was with Daisy, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. I thought she must have her reasons. Reasons I couldn't even imagine, ones that would make it understandable. But what do the investigation results show? Daisy used her charm to boost her sales performance and, when she faced the inevitable consequences, tried to use Thomas to cover it up.
You lied to me. You're not pregnant? Lied? You're the one who tempted me by bragging about your dad's wealth.
Thomas is at a loss for words. His lips tremble and his eyes begin to wander.
Holly, I'm sorry. I'll leave this fraud immediately. I finally realize how smart you are. I've come to my senses.
Thomas suddenly makes a deep apology at the entrance. Daisy tries to forcefully pull Thomas back up to a standing position.
You promised to leave Holly and, once you got your dad's inheritance in a few years, to provide me with a comfortable life. Take responsibility. You must be kidding. Think about the situation. There's no way I'm taking responsibility when you're not even pregnant.
Gordon and I exchanged glances, slowly shaking our heads in disbelief. Since we began living separately, Thomas had stopped contributing to the household expenses. There was no way we could forgive such a reprehensible man who left no room for sympathy. With Gordon's help, we went through a straightforward court process and finalized the divorce. Thomas was also ordered to pay alimony. After that, Gordon used much of his assets to move into a high-end retirement home. It was a luxurious place with a concierge, a lifestyle that many seniors would envy. Are you sure about this? Won't you feel lonely living by yourself?
I don't want to live with a son who is consumed by greed.
Well, you have a point.
My days with Holly were comfortable and happy. But now, I want you to focus on your own happiness. Thank you for everything.
Gordon bowed his head to me deeply. His words of gratitude, filled with grace and respect, made me feel like all my efforts over the years were being recognized, and I was incredibly happy.
Thank you for everything.
Gordon didn't turn a blind eye when he saw that I was being deceived by Thomas and helped me through the tough times after the divorce. He made sure I wouldn't struggle to live on my own. I was deeply grateful to him for all of that. In his elegant apartment, Gordon smiled. It seemed he chose this lavish lifestyle on purpose, to make sure Thomas didn't inherit any of his wealth. Daisy, on the other hand, had to work nights to pay off her many debts. Despite being a top performer in insurance sales, she was caught up in repeated sexual bribery scandals. Her actions caused several divorces, and when her company found out, she was fired with a severe penalty. Bitter and seeking revenge, Daisy stormed into Thomas's workplace. Without an appointment, she ignored the security guards and caused a scene in Thomas's department, shouting and creating a ruckus. This incident revealed Thomas's infidelity to the entire company, leading to his resignation. He moved to a remote area where people didn't care much about rumors, starting over as an engineer at a small factory. Every now and then, I received calls from Thomas. Most of them were him whining about reducing the alimony. He pleaded for leniency, claiming his life was tough. "You need to pay the full amount," I declared firmly, hearing his dry sigh on the other end of the line. The house where Thomas and I lived together was eventually sold to a real estate company. I sold unnecessary items to a thrift shop and had the movers take the essentials. Now, the house is completely empty. I quietly reminisced about the days spent there. With the curtains removed, I could see the blue sky through the windows.
That's enough. I'll live independently. This is my new beginning.
After checking the window locks, I left the house. I turned my back on the home I would never return to and walked away without looking back. It's been almost a year now. Feeling a bit hesitant, I held the hand of the tall man next to me. As I lightly gripped his large, strong hand, he squeezed back firmly. I met him at my current workplace, a man a bit younger than me. He was kind, considerate, and a divorced man with a son. From the moment we met, I was drawn to him. I thought I was done with romance. But life is full of surprises.
"Hey, I have someone I want you to meet today. He's like a real dad to me."
I was about to see Gordon again. My heart was full of excitement and hope. I felt like the path ahead, with him by my side, led to happiness. Surely, it would forever. You know what, actually? Daddy has been.
What?
I was stunned by my young daughter's confession. That man. I can't believe he's been doing this behind my back. I will never forgive him. In that moment, I vowed to do whatever it takes to send my husband to hell and make him regret it with every fiber of his being. My name is Nancy, and I'm a 42-year-old who can't handle the heat. Every year when summer comes around, my appetite plummets and I lose all my energy. I'm not sure if it's because of my poor lifestyle habits or if the summer heat has just been insane lately, but this year, I'm determined to at least get some sugar in my system by stocking up on ice cream to help me get through it. I try all sorts of things to cope with the summer, but I have painful memories of winter too. This was a few years ago. I thought I was living happily with my husband Ken and our daughter Ellie, or so I thought.
Ellie! Let's go out with Daddy.
Okay, Ellie replied as Ken took her hand and tried to leave the house. For some reason, our daughter didn't seem too enthused.
That sounds nice. Where are you going? Take me with you,
I said to Ken, feeling a bit excited. Huh? Nancy, you don't need to come, he retorted.
What?
You've got a lot of housework to do, right? Just stay home and take care of it.
What's that supposed to mean? You said the same thing last time and didn't take me with you. Have you been cold to me lately?
I could tell from his straight face that he wasn't joking, but I wanted to believe it was a joke, so I tried to play it off. But Ken just said, "It's out of consideration for you, since you're so busy, Nancy." He spat out those words that couldn't possibly be sincere, then headed to the parking lot with Ellie in tow. If he really wanted to be considerate, wouldn't he normally say something like, "Let's go out to take a break since housework is tough," or "I'll help you out"? Lately, Ken has been going out somewhere with just Ellie more and more often. If I say I want to go too, like I did earlier, he turns me down. And when I ask the two of them where they went after they get back, they just say it's a secret. I wonder if my family hates me. If Ellie hates me, maybe it's because I'm always nagging her and getting angry about her picky eating. Maybe it's because Ken knows I'm a stay-at-home mom, and lately I haven't even been putting much effort into my makeup since I only go out for shopping in the neighborhood. As I thought about it more, I started to feel like I had some shortcomings of my own. I decided to spruce myself up today. After finishing the housework, I did my makeup and prepared a dinner full of Ellie's favorite dishes, eagerly awaiting their return. However,
Welcome home, Ken. You too, Ellie.
I greeted them with a smile as they walked in. But Ken merely said, "I'm back," without even making eye contact with me. Ellie looked tired, probably from playing all day. "Ellie, did you have fun on your outing?" "Yeah." "You didn't have fun?"
That's not true, right, Ellie?
Ken interjected into the conversation, even though I was asking Ellie. Prompted by Ken, Ellie replied,
It was fun.
but her response seemed somewhat hesitant. Usually when Ellie truly enjoys herself, she shares the day's events with me, adding her own commentary. Meanwhile, Ken seemed flustered by Ellie's lackluster reaction. Was it because she didn't enjoy the place he took her to? Or were the two of them hiding something? Neither Ken nor Ellie said anything more, so I had no proof. They might have genuinely just gone out to hang, but the fact that they didn't invite me along left a strange, unsettled feeling in my gut. By the way, the only person who noticed my makeup and outfit that day was Ellie, who had regained her energy later on.
Mom, you look pretty today,
Ellie remarked. Upon hearing her words, Ken glanced at me briefly, but all he said was, "She sure does." And that was the end of it. He could have said a little more than that, don't you think? I felt the urge to lash out in anger, but the fact that my appearance went largely unnoticed might mean my efforts were misguided. And here I was, convinced that the two of them had grown to hate me. Even though they're my own family, I really didn't know what I should do. Even after that, Ken continued to take only Ellie out somewhere every weekend. No matter what I said, he still wouldn't bring me along with them. Their return time gradually got later and later, from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., until eventually they didn't come home until 10 p.m. A new record for the latest they'd been out. Ellie was fast asleep, carried on Ken's back. His behavior had finally gone too far, so I couldn't help but scold Ken as soon as he got home.
Hey! Where on earth are you taking Ellie this late at night? She has kindergarten tomorrow. You need to put her to bed early, not drag her around until the middle of the night.
At my words, Ken furrowed his brow as if to say I was being annoying. Ignoring me completely as if he couldn't even hear my voice, he headed straight upstairs to the bedroom.
Are you listening? If you dote on Ellie enough to take her out to play every week, then at least think about her health too. Shut up, will ya?
Ken suddenly raised his voice. Ellie, who had been sound asleep, must have woken up from Ken's shouting and started crying.
Ellie, come here, come here. Don't cry,
I said as I pulled Ellie away from Ken's back and held her close.
Don't yell when Ellie's here.
I rebuked Ken.
What's your problem, Nancy? Getting all grumpy the moment I come home. Are you in a bad mood because you don't get to go out with us?
That's not it at all.
I'm just saying if you're going to take Ellie out, consider the time.
So you're jealous of Ellie because she always gets to go out with me, huh?
Why do you interpret it that way? Isn't it normal for a parent not to want their child out late at night?
Just get my shower ready. Bring me a change of clothes.
What's with that tone? You know what? Forget it. Get your own clothes. Huh? You always bring them for me, don't you? It's your fault for making me angry with your attitude. I'm not doing anything for you.
You're a horrible woman. I married the wrong person, Ken said, giving me a cold stare that seemed unthinkable for a husband looking at his wife. He slammed the door shut with a deliberately loud noise and stomped off towards the bathroom with heavy footsteps. I couldn't help but feel scared. What's his deal? I don't think I said anything wrong. If anything, Ken lacks awareness as a father when it comes to Ellie. He used to be much more family-oriented, and he wasn't the type of person to express anger in a way that terrified those around him. How did he end up like this? It's been about 6 years since we got married. Maybe it's time to reevaluate our relationship as husband and wife. Ever since the incident that day, Ken's careless treatment of me has become more noticeable. Take care of this for me, he said.
Huh?
It was a Sunday. What Ken handed me was a single memo. Written in Ken's handwriting were things like ice cream and pizza.
What's this? You want me to go buy this stuff?
You're not doing anything anyway, right? Please.
No way, you're just lounging around the house doing nothing too. Go buy it yourself.
What? You're a stay-at-home wife. Don't you dare defy me. Whose money do you think allows you to live comfortably?
And whose hard work do you think allows you to live without doing any housework? Ken, you earn the money, I work at home. It's just a division of roles, right? We should be equals.
You're not cute at all. Why would he say something like that just because I stated the obvious? Ellie must have noticed my irritation, as she was looking at me with an awkward expression. I quickly forced a smile and beamed at Ellie alone.
Anyway, at least do your own shopping.
At my words, "You're so stingy," Ken grumbled. I wanted to complain that even little Ellie does things for herself, but I kept quiet because it would only lead to a big fight. Lately, my fights with Ken have been increasing at this rate. Thinking it would be a bad influence on Ellie, I tried my best to suppress my feelings and avoid clashing with Ken as much as possible. Isn't there some way to rebuild a good relationship with Ken again? At this rate, the thought of divorce might cross my mind. Ellie is attached to Ken too, so I want to avoid that option as much as possible. I racked my brain trying to think if there was anything I could do as a parent and as a wife. But Ken probably doesn't consider my feelings at all. He takes Ellie out less often now, but his late-night outings have increased. He'd leave the house saying he's going for a walk after dinner and not return for hours. He's also frequently out of the house on his days off. Maybe he doesn't like being together because our fights have increased. I keep trying to get along with him, but it's all in vain. I feel like even Ellie's expression has somehow gotten gloomier. Unsure of what to do, I suggested to Ken that we go out as a family.
Ellie's birthday is coming up, so let's go to the aquarium or something and then eat out on the way back. To celebrate her birthday.
At my suggestion,
I want to see the dolphins.
Ellie was overjoyed. Although there was an air about Ken that he wanted to refuse, he must have judged from Ellie's demeanor that he couldn't say no.
All right,
he agreed. I thought that if we spent time together as a family, surely this awkward atmosphere would change. By having fun outside instead of inside the house, I believed our conversations would increase, but then…
What? You have to work?
Sorry, but I have to go to the office. See ya.
Wait a minute.
On Ellie's birthday, Ken said,
I got a call from the company summoning me, so I'm going to work.
And left without apologizing. Mom, what about the aquarium? Ellie had tears in her eyes. Bewildered by the sudden turn of events, I couldn't bring myself to say we weren't going or that we would go.
I'm sorry.
So I vaguely consoled Ellie. In the end, Ellie and I went to the aquarium together that day, but we canceled the dining out plans in case Ken came home. However, Ken didn't contact us at all even late into the night, and shockingly, he didn't return until morning.
What's the meaning of canceling our family plans, not contacting us, and coming home in the morning?
I had waited up for Ken without sleeping, and the moment he got home, I couldn't help but yell at him. But without looking the least bit sorry.
It can't be helped since it was for work,
Ken retorted.
I'm not angry that it was canceled because of work. I'm angry that you don't have the slightest intention of apologizing, Ken. Yesterday too. Ellie was so excited, so I at least took her to the aquarium, but she had a sad look on her face the whole time because you weren't there. Ellie said she wanted to eat out with the three of us, Daddy included, so we canceled the restaurant reservation and waited for you. When you cancel plans like that, don't you think your family might be waiting for you at home? Even now, you can't even say a single sorry.
My grievances against Ken came pouring out one after another like a dam had burst. I felt like I shouldn't say these things, but I couldn't stop myself anymore.
You're the one who waited up on your own accord, right, Nancy? If you're going to complain so much, you should have just gone to sleep instead of purposely staying awake and waiting. Don't use Ellie as an excuse to cover up your own bad mood. You're just getting irrationally angry on your own, aren't you? How did it turn into that? Don't you feel anything about canceling Ellie's birthday plans? I've told you over and over, haven't I? It was for work.
Are you telling me to quit my job, Nancy?
That's not what I… Enough! I'm exhausted. I'm taking a shower and going to bed.
Saying that, Ken turned his face away, just like when we fought before, and went to the bathroom. I've tried to convince myself countless times that it couldn't be true, but maybe it really is impossible for us to continue as husband and wife. Even if we stay together in a loveless marriage for Ellie's sake, if she senses something off about our relationship in the future, we'll end up hurting her anyway. If we keep up this awkward state, it's only a matter of time before Ellie notices. Ellie's not that dense. But the Ellie right now loves both Ken and me. If we got divorced and she was told she could only choose one parent, wouldn't that be painful for her? Unable to decide whether to divorce or not, my heart wavered. Then one day,
Ellie, I'm sorry we couldn't go to the aquarium for your birthday the other day. How about taking a bath with Daddy today? Bath time! I want to play with Ducky.
Ellie was delighted to be invited to take a bath by Ken. How many years has it been since Ken took a bath together with Ellie? But it seems Ken feels bad about the other day in his own way. He doesn't have to apologize to me, but I at least wanted him to feel sorry for Ellie, so I was a little relieved to hear him say sorry.
Mommy, Daddy said he'll play with me in the bath. That's great, Ellie.
Ellie happily hugged her bath toys and skipped off towards the bathroom, thinking how adorable she was in my doting parent way.
Have fun,
I said to Ken. Ken merely replied, "Yeah." He's still cold towards me as always, but that's fine for now. Just seeing Ellie looking so happy is enough. Or so I thought. It was about 20 minutes after the two of them had gone to take a bath.
Nancy! Nancy! Help!
I heard Ken's loud voice. Thinking something had happened to Ellie, I hurried to the bathroom to find Ken collapsed on the floor.
Ken! What's wrong?
I called out to him, but there was no response, so he seemed to be unconscious but still breathing. His feet and arms were turning red, so maybe he got lightheaded from the heat. Glancing around, I realized Ellie was nowhere to be seen. What was going on? She was supposed to be taking a bath. I felt bad for Ken, but I figured the missing Ellie took priority, so I frantically searched all over the house. Then, going outside and around to the back of the house. "Mommy, Mommy." I heard a faint voice coming from the shed. It was Ellie's voice. I immediately opened the door to the shed. There was Ellie, sitting amidst the cleaning supplies and trash we planned to throw out. Why was she in a place like this, playing hide and seek? No, that couldn't be. It might seem unusual, but our house has a side entrance to the bathroom. We used to have a large dog. It was designed that way so it would be easy to wash the dog's feet after walks. So it was entirely possible for Ellie to come to this shed alone from the bathroom. But there's no way she'd suddenly hide in the shed when she was so looking forward to taking a bath with Ken. Which means the suspicious one is,
Why are you in a place like this? Did Daddy tell you to?
I instinctively hugged Ellie close. The poor thing, her small body was completely chilled from being in the freezing shed. "Yeah, Daddy said to wait here before the bath. He said he'd call for me later, so I couldn't come out until then."
Why would he say something like that?
I've been keeping it a secret, but
What?
what Ellie told me was truly horrifying. I'm ashamed that I'd been living in ignorance. And more than that, I felt hatred towards Ken. I absolutely won't forgive him. I'll make him regret it from the bottom of his heart. And so, I resolved to take everything away from Ken.
Huh? It's cold. What is this? Hey, is that you, Nancy?
Ken's voice rang out, clearly conveying his confusion. "That's right. So you've woken up."
What do you mean, woken up? Nancy, you left me in the bathroom with no clothes on? What a cold-hearted wife.
Saying that, Ken opened the door and came out. Immediately after, Ken's face froze.
What? Dad? Mom?
Waiting for Ken with me were his parents-in-law. The two of them glared sternly at Ken.
Why are you two here? I'm not wearing any clothes, don't look. Towel! Towel!
Ken hurriedly grabbed a bath towel and hid his body.
Isn't there something else you should have been hiding? Huh? What are you trying to say?
Ken replied to my question with an irritated attitude. He'll only be able to act like that for now. You should have hidden this person, shouldn't you? Saying that, I dragged out the woman I had waiting in the hallway.
No! Stop!
The woman cried out. Upon seeing her, Ken's expression froze once again.
What? Why? Ken, it seems you were having a date with this woman in her bathroom while leaving Ellie in the shed. How do you know that?
Ken suddenly covered his mouth, wearing an expression that said he'd screwed up. Seeing Ken like that made me so happy, I couldn't help but laugh. I heard everything from Ellie and this woman. No matter how much you try to hide it, Ken, it's pointless. Give it up. At my words, Ken held his head in his hands. He must have realized he can no longer keep it hidden. What I heard from Ellie was an unbelievable story. Apparently, Ken has been repeatedly cheating with this woman, Linda, all this time. And with Ellie too. That's right. The place he was taking Ellie out to when he said he was going to play was Linda's house. No wonder he wouldn't take me along. And to Ellie. You can't tell Mommy about where we went or who we met. Ellie will get in trouble if you do. He apparently said. Because of that, Ellie didn't actually want to go to his mistress's house, but she couldn't honestly say so and had no choice but to stay quiet about it.
Using Ellie as an alibi for your affair is the worst. I'm so disappointed in you as a person. You're a disgrace to the family.
Saying that, Maria, my mother-in-law, slapped Ken hard across the face. She even hit Ken's body with a bottle of laundry detergent, but no one tried to stop her. The only one who reluctantly said,
"That's enough,"
was Linda. Everyone looked at Ken with the feeling that he deserved to be hit.
Why are you calling Mom and the others over my affair? That's low, Nancy. I don't want to be called low by someone who did something as underhanded as having an affair in the first place. Your misdeeds were just too much, so I simply wanted to let your parents, who dote on Ellie, know about it too. What's wrong with that? That's right. Don't you dare complain so high and mighty, Ken.
My father-in-law Tom yelled at Ken, agreeing with my words. As doting grandparents to their first grandchild Ellie, their hatred for Ken might exceed even mine. Tom, who was apparently a troublemaker in his youth, had a very sharp glare, and I could tell Ken was trembling in fear.
Linda, how did you get caught? I made sure you got away, didn't I?
I found out from Linda herself that Ken had invited her here. Why the hell would Ken do something so stupid as to invite his mistress to our house? You really think so too, right? You see, the story goes back to Ellie's birthday. On that day, Ken had originally made plans to meet up with Linda, it seems. He was going to bring Ellie along as usual, he said. But when I suggested a birthday party for Ellie, the plans changed completely. When Ken told Linda, "I want to cancel this time," she got angry, saying,
"Which is more important, me or your family?"
Their relationship got a bit strained from there and things stayed awkward between them for a while, apparently. Recently, Ken apologized to her and told her, "I cherish you, Linda." And as proof that Linda was more important to him than his family, he invited Linda to our house. He even said cheesy lines like,
"If my wife finds out about your existence, Linda, I'll choose you this time for sure."
He says he invited her over, but you can't really call making love for a few dozen minutes in the shower room an invitation. And to avoid suspicion even if it took a long time, he brought along not just himself, but Ellie, who loves playing in the bath. I think Ken's cowardice is showing through everywhere, but Linda was apparently still happy about it. Love is blind, as they say. And so the two of them ended up having a secret rendezvous at our house. However, Ken got too excited by the extraordinary situation of meeting his mistress in his own shower room, causing his blood pressure to rise. He got lightheaded and lost consciousness just like that. Just before losing consciousness, he somehow managed to help only Linda escape through the side door to the outside, but in her haste, Linda forgot to bring her clothes and only had a towel. She was locked out of the side door after Ken passed out, so she couldn't have him get her belongings. With nowhere to run, she hid behind our shed and was easily found by me. This wasn't supposed to happen. I'm sorry, Linda said with tears in her eyes. Ken sighed in annoyance. This is the worst, he said. What a despicable line to say at a time like this. I couldn't help but rebuke him.
Even if she's your mistress, that's no way to treat your girlfriend who's crying, is it? Whose side are you on, Nancy? The one thing I'm sure of is that I'm your enemy, Ken.
My in-laws made displeased expressions at Ken clicking his tongue. Noticing this, Ken averted his eyes in embarrassment and said,
That woman is just spouting nonsense. I'm not having an affair. What?
Linda looked at Ken with a shocked expression at his words. This was an unexpected betrayal.
That's right. This woman opened the side door on her own and took Ellie out of the shower room.
Everyone there thought it was a stretch. But Ken seems to want to somehow get through this situation with this nonsensical excuse.
She's a trespasser,
he accuses Linda.
I can't believe this. Ken, didn't you invite me over? I still have messages from you on my smartphone.
Ken cowers at Linda's words.
That's right, I confiscated Linda's smartphone, so I got to see all the exchanges between you two afterwards.
When I say that, Linda takes on a triumphant attitude.
I won't let you get away with trying to save only yourself. When I fall into hell, you're coming with me.
Saying that, Linda slapped Ken across the face. Although Ken said,
What are you doing?
He seems unable to say anything to Linda's words and bites his lip in silence. I'm sorry.
I apologize for getting into this kind of relationship with your husband.
So please, just forgive me. It seems Linda has finally decided to betray Ken. She's clearly trying to curry favor with me. Behind Linda, Ken is saying childish things like,
That's not fair, Linda.
Don't worry, Linda.
It's not like only one of you will be saved. When I send you to hell, I plan to do it with both of you together. What? They should be coming soon. What are you talking about? I'm talking about them. I don't understand.
A little while after that exchange, the doorbell of our house rang.
Excuse me, Tom. Could you please greet the person who just arrived and bring them here?
Tom heads to the front door, stunned by my words but understanding. And then a single person arrives, guided by Tom.
What?
Linda's face freezes. Surprised, aren't you? I can't help but laugh.
This is Linda's daddy. I found his contact info in Linda's smartphone, so I messaged him about the situation and invited him here.
As I introduce him with a smile.
No, that's wrong.
Ken cries out. What? I ask in response.
Why are you here, boss?
Ken is shocked and Linda turns pale. Huh? Boss? What do you mean?
Nancy, why did you call my boss here? I thought it was questionable to call her parent, but you got the wrong person. You just had to complicate things.
Thinking it couldn't be, I checked the sent message history on Linda's smartphone in my hand. I definitely sent a message to the person registered as Daddy, just as I thought. I didn't make any mistake. In other words, this person should be Linda's father, but... Meanwhile, the boss is also standing there frozen in place, his face pale.
Please tell me this isn't true, Linda.
The boss groans. Linda breaks down crying.
I'm sorry. Forgive me.
She screams. Ken is dumbfounded too.
Am I not your lover? What do you mean by daddy?
Linda is flustered and panicking. while the boss is desperately trying to get the truth out of her.
I called him here thinking he was your daddy because that's how he was registered. Was I wrong?
The boss is shocked by my question.
Daddy!
At the boss's words, Linda hangs her head. She probably can't bear to look at his face.
Did you see me not as a lover, but as a daddy? Was I just a wallet to you? That's not true. I really did love you. Then why am I registered as daddy? I thought it was strange. Every time we met, you wanted things, and the talk of marriage never went anywhere. Listen to me. It's not like that. I don't want to hear it. I was the only one who thought we were in a serious relationship.
At first, I had no idea what was going on, but apparently, Linda and Ken had started an affair while working at the same company. Meanwhile, Linda was also dating the boss, so to speak, but basically, she was receiving financial assistance from him. The boss, who thought they were in a serious relationship, was even considering marriage, but Linda wasn't enthusiastic about it, and she always evaded the topic. Despite that, she would beg for an engagement ring, and in hindsight, there were many odd things about their relationship. It seems Linda didn't have that kind of relationship with Ken, so the one she truly liked was probably Ken. The boss was just a sugar daddy. In other words, he had been deceived by Linda. Daddy was registered in her contacts, but Mom wasn't, so I had arbitrarily assumed she was from a single-father household, but now I understood what it meant.
Did you two have fun playing with me? Boss, I had no idea you and Linda were dating. That doesn't matter. You made a fool out of me. You two better be prepared.
The boss shakes off Ken, who tries to stop him, and leaves our house. Linda and Ken both slump to the floor right there.
Looks like you might lose your job and everything else, huh? Because of who? What? What do you mean, everything else? You'll probably lose your family too, right?
Starting now.
What?
I quietly hand Ken the divorce application papers that Maria had brought for me. Please sign this. Let's get a divorce. I'll take custody of Ellie.
Why are you deciding that on your own? Why? You've got some nerve saying that. Ken, do you not understand what you've done to Ellie? You might have repeatedly done things that could traumatize her for life. There's no way I'm going to keep living with a man like that. Are you an idiot? Cut me some slack for one affair.
The moment I was about to lash out at Ken's words, Ken fell backwards with great force. Tom had kicked him.
You've still got a hot head even though you're not wearing any clothes, huh?
Tom's face was red with anger. For some reason, he's smiling with his mouth, but I can sense a murderous aura emanating from his back.
Dad, I don't want to hear your excuses.
Saying that, Tom grabs Ken's hair and slaps his face. Normally, it might seem excessive, but this time, it's probably warranted. No one showed any signs of sympathy for Ken. Probably because they all think Ken is the worst and in the wrong. And so, Ken was forced by Tom to agree to the divorce. He promised to pay compensation and child support, and without any division of assets, everything would go to me. I feel a little bad that we took everything from Ken with just Tom's fist, without any trial or anything, but considering what Ken did to Ellie, it's probably fair. He should lose everything and regret his actions from the bottom of his heart. Afterwards, Linda had to pay compensation to me and also to the boss. Usually, it's difficult to get compensation for romance scams and such, but in Linda's case, she was sloppy, and various pieces of evidence of fraud came to light. After a little investigation, we found a detailed post on her Finsta or whatever on social media, outlining a surefire method for snagging a sugar daddy. That scandal was grounds for her dismissal from the company too. Of course, Ken's misdeeds also came to light, and both of them ended up leaving the company. Ken's job was a bit unique, with strong connections in that world. Often, an incident at one company would spread as gossip to other companies. This time, Ken's scandal spread outside the company, and his job search faced difficulties. In the end, he somehow managed to change industries and find a new job, but it didn't seem to be a good fit, and it didn't last long. In his 30s, he changed jobs 4 times in a row. His resume started to look like someone who couldn't hold down a job, and finally, he couldn't pass any interviews anywhere. However, when God closes a door, he opens a window. There was one place that was willing to hire Ken, even though he had been job hopping. Unlike the corporations he had worked for before, it was a limited company food processing factory, but it should have been a blessing for Ken. But that company was notorious in the industry for being an exploitative company where many employees quit due to health issues. A god, yes, but an evil one. It's his own fault. As for me, I rented out the house we had been living in and started living with my daughter in an apartment near the station. Even though we're divorced, living in a house where such things happened is not good for one's mental health, you know? Actually, when we got divorced. Is it okay if we say goodbye to Daddy? I did ask my daughter. I had already decided on divorce based on my own selfish feelings, but I was worried that Ellie might still want her father around. But Ellie's unexpected response was,
Yay!
It seems Ellie's heart had drifted away from her father due to Ken's repeated betrayals, like being taken to his mistress's house and being neglected, forgetting promises, and not playing with her in the bath. She even made a grown-up statement like,
It was a hassle having to be considerate and play with him.
Which made me laugh in spite of myself. Thanks to that, it goes without saying that I was able to get divorced with a clear conscience. Right after the divorce, Ken didn't seem interested in Ellie at all, and he never said he wanted to see her or requested visitation, but maybe he got lonely as he aged and was by himself. Around the time Ellie started elementary school, he started saying more often that he wanted to meet as a family. But Ellie would scoff. We're not family. And refuse to go. I'm definitely not trying to go along with it, but Ellie is canceling her meetings with Ken in various ways. The other day, she canceled on the day of, saying her stomach hurt. By the way, that was a lie too. Ken seems to be aware of Ellie's lies, and he's dejected, saying, It's my fault. But he's probably still hopeful since he keeps asking for visitation. Though it seems that hope will be crushed by Ellie soon enough. Ellie says, I don't intend to ever see him. So it looks like Ken has a tough road ahead. On the other hand, Ellie and I have built a relationship that's like parent and child, but also like friends. On our days off, we go shopping for clothes together, and Ellie picks out outfits for me, and I enjoy choosing clothes and hair accessories for Ellie too. Having this kind of fun is something you can do when you're the same-sex parent, you know? Recently, she apparently has a boy she likes, and she wants to master making delicious sweets, so I'm in the middle of teaching her how to make really tasty treats. By the way, after the divorce, I drew on my experience as a pastry chef before I got married and opened a Western-style confectionery shop. A famous chain store known for its low prices opened up in the neighborhood, and I'm struggling with rising prices and such, but whenever I see families come in and buy our cakes to celebrate special days, I feel glad I'm doing this. It makes me happy to become a flavor that will remain in someone's memories. The chain stores are a threat, but the local folks seem to favor us over the famous stores because they like our warm flavors. I'll continue making sweets without forgetting that warmth. Ellie even says things like,
Someday I'll take over Mommy's shop.
I'm not getting my hopes up, but I'd be happy if that day really came.
Don't leave the TV on, and either turn off the lights in the living room or your room.
Got it, got it. I'll make sure to save electricity. I left the house to go shopping far away. Whether leaving or staying at home, we as a family are committed to saving energy, like remembering to turn off lights and setting the air conditioner to the right temperature. Today, like always, we reminded each other in the family, and I went out. However, a few hours later when I returned, our dear home had completely changed.
Since you love saving so much, I'll save electricity for you.
The sound that echoed maliciously was Amelia's laughter. Amelia, who sneaked in secretly, had turned off our home's breaker, causing a major problem. The reason she did this? My name is Emma. At 29, I married Liam, my same-aged partner, and moved into my in-laws' house. My mother-in-law had already passed away, and my father-in-law, James, who has a respiratory illness, was living alone. Persuaded by my concerned husband, I started living there while continuing my job. In the in-laws' house, there was also the unmarried Amelia, but we never really got along. James is calm and kind, much like my husband. In contrast, his sister Amelia is temperamental and volatile. Being straightforward, I often clashed with her, and being a few years older, I was somehow managing to keep her in check. Excluding her, it was a peaceful life. But within half a year, James's illness worsened. He needed an oxygen machine even to stay at home. Both Amelia and I were working, so there was no one to help James during the day. We should have arranged for him to live in a care facility, but James refused to leave the house filled with memories of his wife. Consulting with my husband, we concluded it would be cruel to force James to move. So, we hired a caregiver, but that led to more problems. Already not getting along with me, Amelia disliked strangers entering her home and started harassing the caregiver. Invisibly to us, she was abusive and sarcastic, obstructing the work, and repeatedly complained to the agency, saying they couldn't be trusted with her father. By the time we realized the cause, multiple caregivers had quit. And the agency told us they couldn't send anyone new. What do we do now? Other agencies have refused us too.
We must be blacklisted, damn it, all because of Amelia.
Known as a troublesome household, we could no longer hope for a caregiver. We had to think of a solution with a sigh. Amelia, always self-centered, had isolated herself from the family. My husband, as her brother, tried to correct her, but it only led to fierce arguments, and he eventually told her to move out and live independently. But Amelia, angered by such reprimands, started complaining to me, as I was less intimidating than her brother.
You're a daughter-in-law now, so you should take care of him, Emma. Liam can't quit his job, being a man, but you're different.
Overheard by my husband, this sparked another argument. This situation didn't allow James to rest and recover peacefully. I didn't want to give in to Amelia's demands, but I couldn't just stand by either. Feeling indebted to James, who had tried to make me feel at home despite his illness, I decided,
I'll quit my job and take care of James. I'll start learning about caregiving bit by bit. After all, James is family to me too.
When I finally decided to resign for caregiving, James and my husband thanked me with tears. It was a real challenge learning about caregiving from scratch, but James always kindly encouraged me, despite my struggles. The only thing that didn't change was Amelia. She neither moved out nor helped with the housework or caregiving. On her days off, she would disappear, presumably to hang out. Even though I had more time, I was busy with James and studying for caregiving. My husband and I shared household chores, but whenever something was missed, Amelia was quick to complain.
Oh, Emma decided to take on both caregiving and housework, right?
You like doing everything yourself, don't you? If I even slightly talked back, she would retaliate unpleasantly. She kept harassing me like this, but was always found out and scolded by my husband and others. Every time, she would play the victim, saying, "James is too kind to say anything, so I'm doing it for him." Naturally, things didn't improve, and her constant interference slowed down my household tasks, quickly piling up stress. I'm truly grateful to the caregivers who managed to smile and care for James despite her meddling. Not just me, but James and the others were fed up with Amelia's persistent attitude. However, one day, while my husband and I were secretly discussing how to encourage her independence, she announced, "I got engaged and I'm moving out. Goodbye, Dad. I'll come back to visit sometimes." With that, Amelia left the house obediently. We were surprised, but with her stormy presence gone, the house's atmosphere stabilized. James was aging and his condition was a concern, so there were talks of moving him to a care facility, but as I got accustomed to caregiving, we decided to continue with home care. Amelia, now living at her fiancé's place, often returned home. "I bet there'll be leftovers from dinner tonight. Put them in a Tupperware, I'll take them with me." Apparently, she was relying on our leftovers to avoid cooking for her fiancé. Her selfishness remained, treating me like a housemaid as before. "Amelia, don't order Emma around without helping yourself." Yeah, sorry Emma. That's enough, right? Hurry up with the dinner." Even when scolded by James, she would dismiss it with an indifferent attitude. Honestly, the amount of food I had to prepare didn't change much from before she left, so that wasn't really an issue. Rather, the problem was the food and utility costs. Although Amelia had moved out and stopped contributing financially, her frequent returns and unrestrained behavior strained our budget. Moreover, she had no sense of saving electricity or money. "Amelia, turn off the lights in unused rooms. Can I go ahead if you're not using the shower?" Amelia, lying on the couch with her back to the still-on TV, seemed to be playing games on her mobile phone. She had left the lights on in the bathroom and changing room, indicating she'd take a shower, but showed no signs of moving. The unnecessary electricity use and her lingering were holding everyone back. When I asked her to decide between gaming or showering, Amelia glared at me angrily. "Don't tell me what to do. I was just about to go. You always nag about saving and cutting costs, but it hardly makes a difference." "You're so petty, Auntie." "What did you just call me?" "I called you Emma. Don't pretend you heard wrong and get mad," she retorted, even as James scolded her. While saying this, Amelia finally turned off the TV and headed to the changing room. She always complained, but at least she listened to what was said. However, having worked for years and having a fiancé, her mindset remained that of a rebellious child. I had stopped expecting her to act her age. Though I didn't mind it, our relationship with Amelia didn't improve even after she left home, remaining tense. I had hoped that saving money could be a common ground for our family, but that too seemed unlikely. One day, I was driving to a large shopping mall in the suburbs, away from home. I was running an errand for James. James wasn't unable to go out, but he needed to carry a portable oxygen tank when he did. For the elderly James, carrying the heavy tank, even with a carrier, was burdensome, and the visible tubes made it obvious he was on oxygen therapy. Tired of being pitted by acquaintances saying, "Poor thing," each time they saw him, James preferred staying home. There were often errands, but my husband usually handled them when he was home. Being careful not to leave James alone, this time I had no choice but to leave him for the errand. I was worried, but James wasn't helpless. He only needed the tank for breathing. He was still capable of doing quite a bit by himself. While it's important to be mindful of saving electricity, I asked him to use the air conditioning as needed, and I set off for shopping. I completed the shopping without issues and returned home with the groceries a few hours later. I had left in the late morning, but now it was evening. Before entering the house, I picked up my mobile phone. There might be a message from my husband about dinner. However, what I saw on the screen shocked me.
Huh?
There were numerous missed calls. From my husband, James, and the general hospital where James goes. A cold sweat broke out on my back. While driving, I had switched my phone to a mode that wouldn't ring. And in my rush to get home early today, I forgot to switch it back, unaware of the incoming calls. A sense of foreboding crossed my mind. First, I tried calling back my husband, but the phone just kept ringing without connecting. Growing more anxious, I then tried James's number, but there was no answer. As a last hope, I called the hospital. A receptionist answered, and trying to stay composed, I asked about James.
James is currently hospitalized. I can't provide more details over the phone. Could you please come to the hospital?
After being transferred to several departments, I was informed of this and froze. I quickly replied, "I'm on my way," and hurriedly turned the car key, restarting the engine. The car was filled with urgency. As if reflecting my anxiety, the roads were congested. James had been fine when I left, waving goodbye as usual. I regretted leaving him alone, wondering how he could have been hospitalized so suddenly. Arriving at the hospital, I headed to the directed room. Walking down the tense corridor, I quietly opened the door, and there sat my husband, who had been unreachable. We looked at each other in surprise. But he explained that he was at the hospital waiting for James's tests. Which is why he couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't answer the phone either, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, how is James doing?
He prompted me to look at James, who was sleeping in the bed. His complexion seemed a bit off, but his breathing, which I had been worried about, appeared calm. He's okay. There's no problem with his condition. He's just here for some tests. Actually, hearing from my husband that James was not in danger, I finally relaxed. But why was James hospitalized? Just as I was about to ask that question, the door to the room burst open. It was Amelia, rushing in, her eyes filled with fear. She ignored us and ran straight to James's bed. Seeing him lying there, she let out a loud scream.
What happened? Dad!
Her voice was so loud that my husband hurried to calm her down. But her frantic voice echoed through the room.
Please calm down!
My husband tried to pull her away from the bed. Her frightened voice eventually quietened down, but then she suddenly glared at me and started yelling with intense emotion.
What were you doing while you were with him?
I was overwhelmed by her anger and lost for words. My husband intervened to calm her, but her anger was still directed at me. Confused, I was caught in a strange sensation. James needed oxygen, but such a sudden hospitalization seemed unlikely.
Wait, can we talk calmly?
My husband turned to us with a calm voice, explaining what he knew. James was transported here because the power to his oxygen device had turned off. After I left, James had been sleeping in his room, but during that time, the power went off. Awoken by breathlessness and trying to turn the device back on, it wouldn't work, and he couldn't reach me or my husband. James connected a portable tank and managed to calm down, but he was anxious about waiting for us to return. Feeling a headache, James decided to go to the hospital, but we usually drive him, so he had no way to get there. He tried to call a taxi, but his hands were trembling, making it difficult to dial. So, James went to ask the neighbors to call a taxi for him. The neighbor who came out to the entrance screamed upon seeing James. He was taken to the living room, laid down, and cooled with ice packs while waiting for the ambulance. That's when James realized he had gotten heat stroke. After that, thanks to the appropriate treatment at the hospital, James's condition stabilized and he was safe. My husband heard from the doctor that James might not have noticed the heat due to his age, and he thought the trembling hands and headache were just symptoms of aging. Because James had convulsions, he was immediately treated and hospitalized for testing, leading to the current situation. After hearing this explanation from my husband, I asked him a daring question.
It's unlikely that the power source for the device wouldn't work. Didn't we install it in a place where the plug couldn't be accidentally pulled out?
My husband furrowed his brow and seemed deep in thought. Amelia remained silent during this time, but her face was visibly pale.
That's right. It's impossible for it to come unplugged on its own. I went back home to check, and the plug wasn't out.
Then how? I was even more confused by my husband's words. He had returned home to prepare for the hospital stay, and found that although the power was off, the plug was still connected. He then looked sternly at Amelia. It was clear she was hiding something, but I couldn't understand why he was so angry. Suddenly, my husband shouted at Amelia.
You cut off the breaker, didn't you? Say something.
Amelia jolted, beginning to tremble. She tried to say something, but only inaudible sounds came out. Then, my husband pulled something out of his pocket. The hospital had tried to contact me, my husband, and Amelia several times, but my husband was the first to get through. When he returned home for the preparations, he immediately sensed something odd. As soon as he opened the door, a wave of incredible heat hit him. The lights in the entrance hall didn't work. Realizing this, he checked around the house and found all electrical appliances were off. He rushed to check the breaker, and as expected, the switch was turned off. Surprised and suspicious, he wondered why this happened. There was no event like a lightning strike to cause the breaker to trip, and no other houses seemed to be affected by a power outage. However, he then remembered something. Our house had several security cameras installed. Before we got married, a burglar had broken into the house, and James had installed them for my mother-in-law's peace of mind. Even though we were saving money, these were kept for everyone's safety, and we weren't allowed to remove them.
Footage up until the power outage should still be there,
my husband thought, so he quickly restored the power and checked the recordings.
I have the footage here. I transferred it to show both of you.
In the hospital room, my husband took out his mobile phone. He showed us the transferred footage. The first thing shown was the familiar view of our house's entrance. A few minutes after I left, Amelia appeared. I was surprised to learn she had come to the house and involuntarily glanced at her. She entered the house using her key. Unlike her usual noise, she looked around suspiciously, almost as if she was checking if I was away. My husband then switched to the footage from a camera inside the entrance. The breaker in our house is located near the ceiling above the shoe rack. Amelia climbed onto a chair meant for wearing shoes and opened the breaker's cover.
What are you doing?
Even though I knew what was coming, I couldn't suppress my scream. The camera had sound recognition, so along with the movement noises, her dreadful whispering was recorded.
This is the breaker, right? If the fridge stops, Emma will calm down a bit.
Her malicious laughter echoed in the silent hospital room.
I'll save electricity for you, your favorite.
After that, the footage ended due to her turning off the breaker. We were all speechless and motionless. If the breaker was off, of course, the whole house's power supply would stop. The contents of the fridge must have spoiled in the hours before my husband noticed. Her frantic behavior when she rushed into the hospital room suggested she hadn't realized her actions could endanger James's life, a very malicious way to punish me. However, her reaction was unbelievable.
It's because you're always nagging about saving electricity.
Without any signs of remorse, and with tears in her eyes, Amelia started justifying herself.
I didn't know James was home. I thought he had gone out with you. It's your fault for leaving him behind.
She kept repeating I had no idea this would happen. Contrasting her tearful self-defense, I was filled with anger.
Breaking in like a thief and turning off the breaker, it's a miracle he survived. What if something had happened to Dad?
I couldn't help but blame Amelia, but she shouted back at me in defense.
But it's your fault. It's because of you that James is in this situation.
Her accusations pierced my heart. Indeed, I shouldn't have left James alone. Was it my mistake to leave him, thinking going far would be a burden? The tension in the hospital room was palpable, then suddenly broken.
Be quiet.
James, who was supposed to be sleeping, scolded her sternly. He couldn't raise his voice much due to his illness. Being inherently calm, his outburst surprised us all. All three of us turned to him in unison.
Do you realize what you have done? You've caused trouble for everyone and nearly killed me. Emma is not to blame.
James's eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. His tone was stern, unlike his usual gentle demeanor. Awakened by Amelia's screaming and commotion, he had heard everything, including the surveillance camera discussion.
If you're going to continue making noise, leave. And don't come back to the house ever again.
Scolded harshly, Amelia turned pale and froze, but soon began to cry loudly, which was very disturbing. She apologized to James, but he insisted she leave, and my husband escorted her out of the room. James was discharged just a few days later. When we went to the hospital to pick him up, he greeted us with a smile, seemingly recovered. However, upon returning home, Amelia was waiting at the front door. She hadn't shown up in front of us since that incident. We were expecting an apology, but her words were the same as before. It's your fault.
It's all because of you that James ended up like this.
James and my husband were exasperated. Unwilling to admit fault and still blaming me, James stepped forward.
Be thankful I'm not reporting you to the police because you're family. Your actions are absolutely unforgivable.
His cold voice in the hospital room hadn't changed, and she fell silent. But James didn't stop there. He seemed to despise her from the bottom of his heart.
It's disownment. I can't believe you still don't realize the severity of what you've done. Don't come to our house again. I went to the hospital, but I won't attend your wedding either.
He spoke harshly, pushed Amelia aside, and entered the house vigorously. She was probably not expecting to be disowned by her own father, and stood there in shock. We decided to stand by James and support him. So, we entered the house, leaving her behind. Amelia repeatedly tried to apologize afterwards, but James ignored all her attempts. Having been troubled by her too much, we had no sympathy and upheld his decision. James had been asked to financially support Amelia's wedding and honeymoon, but he refused all requests and declared he wouldn't attend the wedding. One day, Amelia ambushed me outside the house. She desperately apologized and begged me to persuade James, but I had already decided not to forgive her. Knowing she would persist if ignored, I quietly listened to her before leaving her there and walking away. This series of events eventually became known to Amelia's fiancé. James had refused to attend the wedding for safety reasons, which puzzled her fiancé, prompting him to contact James. Unaware of the full story, her fiancé was shocked to hear about the emergency caused by Amelia and hurriedly apologized to James. The fiancé, unlike Amelia, seemed to have reasonable judgment. Calling her actions attempted murder, the wedding was eventually called off. They hadn't moved into their new home yet, but the fiancé canceled it and kicked Amelia out. Having already quit her job and spent her savings on beauty treatments in preparation for the wedding, she was left nearly broke, with the wedding cancellation costs to bear. She fell into debt but didn't show up at our doorstep. Meanwhile, the three of us were living peacefully. Without Amelia's disruptive presence, James's health seemed to be improving. Though we couldn't be complacent due to his age, a care facility seemed unnecessary for now. We were even planning a trip. When I received the handset handed to me, a man on the other end claimed to be a police officer.
Just a moment ago, a man claiming to be your husband was transported by ambulance after falling from his wheelchair. We would like to speak with you about it. Can you come to the hospital urgently?
I was so shocked by the sudden news that I became flustered.
My husband? Understood. I'm at work right now, so I'll check with my boss and head over immediately.
I inquired about the hospital to which he was transported, and despite being in the middle of a meeting, I explained the situation, obtained permission from my boss, and left the office. Catching a taxi immediately, I headed to the hospital where 2 police officers and my husband, Ben, were waiting in the room I was guided to. As soon as I entered the room, Ben pointed at me and shouted,
"It's her! She's the one who knocked over the wheelchair! Wait a minute! What are you talking about?"
I was completely taken aback by the abrupt accusation, confused about what was happening. Me, knocking over Ben's wheelchair? After all, I went straight to work from a business trip today, so it had been roughly 2 days since I last saw him. As I stood there in shock, unable to speak, Ben raised his voice.
"Because of what you did, I want a divorce. And prepare compensation. $30,000. Wait a minute. Why would?"
My voice trembled as I was completely overwhelmed.
"Can we discuss the details at the police station?"
The officer stated firmly, urging me to accompany them. Despite explaining multiple times at the police station that I had been at work, the misunderstanding continued, increasing my anxiety. Then, an unexpected person showed up. It was Emma, the chief of Ben's shop. "My name is Anne, 43 years old. I work for a company related to health food. Mainly dealing with beauty supplements, I'm busy running around the sales office with my team for new product proposals. My husband, Ben, who is 2 years my senior, runs a beauty salon on his own, thankfully never short of customers. We met when we were both students, working part-time at the same pub. One time, he protected me from a drunk customer, which started our conversation. From there, we hit it off over shared interests in beauty, and while I was swayed by Ben's assertive nature, I was also drawn to his reliability in times of need and married him a few years later. By then, we were both working professionals. Ben had finished vocational school and was apprenticing at a salon, and I had settled into my job at the current company. I chose to continue working even after marriage. Partly because Ben's income as a hairstylist alone was not enough for both of us to live on, but also because I wanted to build my career. We decided not to have children, opting instead to dedicate our time to work and hobbies. A decision that often surprises our friends, though neither Ben nor I mind. We believe in each having our own form of family. My work schedule varies, with some days ending at regular hours and others requiring overtime. As for holidays, I usually have weekends and public holidays off. Ben generally returns home around the same time each day, but has irregular holidays due to shift work. Hence, our homecoming times and days off vary. But we're both content living our lives, enjoying our hobbies. I'm into bodybuilding, often spending my free time at the gym. Protein supplements are a staple at home, and drinking them after gym sessions has become a routine, also serving as a chance to test our products. Ben's hobby is working on and touring with his motorcycle. There's a small garage behind our house where his prized large motorcycle is kept. He's been passionate about bikes since before we met, collecting tools, parts, and even antique components. Once, he said, "I'm worried about the bike because a typhoon is hitting us directly," and spent the night in the garage in a sleeping bag, worried about his newly changed tires getting damaged.
Hey, it's dangerous. Why don't you come inside?
I'm more worried about the bike than myself. I can't sleep thinking about it getting damaged. His serious tone left me utterly dumbfounded, and I couldn't say anything more. However, about 2 months ago, Ben had an accident while riding with his touring group and broke his leg. I was off that day and shocked when I received the call from the hospital. Seeing him in a wheelchair with a broken right leg, I asked,
"Are you okay? Are you planning to close the shop?"
"If we close, Emma would be in trouble." "Of course, we'll keep the shop open." Emma has been working at Ben's beauty salon since its opening. She is entrusted with the role of chief and is popular with customers due to her brisk and friendly nature. "Really? But how will you get to work?" "The house and the shop are a bit far apart." "You always said it takes you about 20 minutes to walk, right?" "I have work too, so it's difficult for me to drive you." "The shop opens at 10 a.m., but I leave the house by 8 a.m. It's extremely dangerous for him to go that distance in a wheelchair by himself, considering it takes 20 minutes on foot without a fracture."
"Yeah, that's true. I can't drive a car either, so I'll discuss it with Emma."
Later, Ben and Emma talked it over, and it was decided that Emma would drive him. I complained about her having to leave her house earlier because of this, but Ben said it was Emma who offered to do the driving.
She said she's the owner's right arm and got all excited about it.
Though he seemed a bit troubled saying it, Ben didn't seem entirely displeased either. I'm too busy to meddle in the shop's affairs, but I can't help feeling astonished at my husband's situation. For the past 2 months, we've relied on her for Ben's transportation, feeling both guilty and grateful. Once, when I visited the shop because I needed to talk to Ben, I had a conversation with Emma, who seems to be actively taking hair supplements. I occasionally bring our company's hair supplements as a token of appreciation, always thanking her. "Emma, are you sure it's not too much of a burden? Are you okay?"
"I'm fine. I'm tough, so this is nothing for me."
"I'm sorry, it just feels like..."
"Don't worry about it. By the way, the supplement you brought last time was amazing. I even shared some with my friends and recommended it."
Her always cheerful demeanor somehow felt reassuring. I'm proud that such a bright and wonderful girl is the face of this beauty salon.
"Actually, I have a business trip coming up, but could you cut my hair before I leave? Just a trim is fine." "Where are you going?" "I'm expecting souvenirs, you know."
She joked as she pulled out the appointment book from behind the counter and flipped to the reservation page. "It's nothing special." I laughed along as I chose an available date and time. "Then I'll see you in a week."
"Yes, please."
The week flew by, and on the day I was to cut Emma's hair, I stopped by the shop during a break from work, just as the previous customer, a woman in her 50s with a soft bob and light perm, was leaving. The woman walked out briskly, looking youthful. Emma, who was behind the counter, watched her leave, then looked down to write something in the appointment book. As I entered, she looked up and momentarily appeared awkward, but quickly returned to her usual smile. "Hello. Could you wait just a moment? I'll be ready in no time." She said this and quickly cleaned up the hair on the floor and sanitized the chair, finishing everything in about 3 minutes. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, have a seat here." I sat down in the indicated chair and looked at myself in the mirror. I hadn't had a haircut in a while and looked quite aged. How careless can I get?" To my spontaneous remark, Emma laughed. "Not at all. You just want a trim today, right?"
That's right. I'm thinking of growing it out to try this style next.
I tapped my phone, showing her a hair catalog webpage, and pointed to a photo of a shoulder-length hairstyle.
Do you think it would suit me?
"It'll look great. You have a bit of a wave in the back here, so we'll make sure to cover that." "It'll suit you perfectly." Emma gestured.
You'll look fantastic. Let's do it.
And exclaimed over the mirror. Even though the shop played calming music box tunes and maintained a peaceful atmosphere, something felt off, like a mix of unease beneath Emma's steady hands and expressions. Maybe it was intuition. Despite the ordinary setting with music box tunes, Emma's expressions, the sound of scissors, and our chat, something seemed different. Since it was just a trim, the haircut was finished quicker than usual, and I paid before leaving. I decided to head home immediately due to my next appointment, but as she saw me off, I couldn't help but notice she seemed a bit down. I impulsively asked her,
Emma, are you tired? Are you getting enough rest?
Not at all. Do I have dark circles? I've been watching dramas late into the night recently. She laughed off, making me second-guess my concern.
If you're feeling good, then that's great. Thanks for today.
Good luck on your business trip. I waved back at her encouragement and left the shop. That night, as I looked up at the beautiful full moon on my way home, I found Ben had unusually come home before me. I was a bit surprised as I put down my things and started preparing dinner.
Hey, I got a haircut from Emma today. What do you think?
Ben looked up from his motorcycle magazine and said, It doesn't seem much different.
Can't you say something nice like it suits me? I just got it trimmed today. Thought I should groom myself once in a while.
I retorted, to which Ben scoffed. We're both in our 40s, what's there to suit or not? His comment, whether a joke or his real thoughts, was followed by him returning to his magazine. Lately, or maybe for a few years now, I've felt Ben being somewhat cold towards me. I remember how he used to praise me for even a small haircut, saying I looked beautiful, and wonder if we were just younger back then. Speaking of today, I was a bit worried about Emma. She seemed a bit down. She said she was fine, but I wonder if something is burdening her. Suddenly, Ben became visibly annoyed and said, Are you saying you don't like her driving me around? That's not what I said. I'm just worried about Emma.
Then don't worry. I know her well enough. Don't meddle in the shop's affairs.
Sorry, no need to get so mad. After dinner, Ben and I ate, and I decided to go to bed early to prepare for tomorrow's business trip. The next day, I left home early in the morning and took the train. I had a meeting with a client and then another meeting at the head office, planning to spend a busy day before staying overnight at a hotel and returning early the next morning by train. Sitting on the train, I opened my planner to check my schedule for the day, realizing I had meetings from morning till evening. This is going to be a headache, I murmured while eating a sandwich I had bought earlier. Though business trips aren't frequent, I thought it was nice to have a taste of travel now and then. Arriving at my destination, the cool autumn breeze felt refreshing as I stood on the platform. It was a nice start to the day. My office has 3 meeting rooms, and the largest one was where the meeting began. It was still morning when I started feeling a bit sleepy. The door opened, and a clerk looked around, spotted me, and came over with a phone handset.
For me?
As I took the handset, a man on the other end identified himself as a police officer. Just a moment ago, a man claiming to be your husband was transported by ambulance after falling from his wheelchair.
Can you come to the hospital urgently?
I was so shocked by the sudden news that I became flustered.
My husband? Understood. I'm at work right now, so I'll check with my boss and head over immediately.
I found out which hospital he was taken to, explained the situation to my boss during the meeting, and left the office. Catching a taxi immediately, I headed to the hospital where 2 police officers and Ben were waiting in the room I was guided to. As soon as I entered the room, Ben pointed at me and shouted,
It's her! She's the one who knocked over the wheelchair. Wait a minute. What are you talking about?
I was completely taken aback by the abrupt accusation, confused about what was happening. Me, knocking over Ben's wheelchair? Besides, I went straight to work from a business trip today, so it had been roughly 2 days since I last saw him. As I stood there in shock, unable to speak, a young-looking officer confirmed with Ben.
Is it really her? Yes, that's her. I saw it with my own eyes. Anne, I never dreamed you would do such a thing. You've been timing this, haven't you? What are you talking about? There's no way I would do that. Because you did this, I'm getting a divorce. And prepare the compensation. $30,000.
Wait a minute. Why would? My voice trembled as I was completely overwhelmed. One of the 2 police officers, a bigger-built man, turned to me and asked where I was about an hour ago when Ben fell, and if I was with anyone. I answered with a shaky voice.
I was in a meeting at work at that time.
Honestly telling them.
Please believe me.
Indeed, they had called my workplace. Since I was attending a meeting, both my boss and colleagues could vouch for me. It should be clear to them that I wasn't the perpetrator once they verify with them. The younger-looking officer began.
Is that so? But we'll need to hear the details at the police station.
He said with a scoff, implying disbelief, and I was taken into custody.
If you check with my workplace, it'll all be clear. Of course, we'll do that, but this is a hospital, not a place for interrogation. And currently, we also have to consider the possibility of attempted murder on your husband.
The officer stated clearly, urging me to accompany them. Reluctantly, I followed them and informed my workplace that I wouldn't be able to return today, heading to the police station. As I was leaving the room, I saw Ben smiling broadly, looking satisfied as if everything was settled. And I didn't miss the sound of him making a call as I stepped into the hallway. At the police station, I kept repeating the same thing. So, I was at work at that time. You know my workplace's number, right? I mustered up the courage to reiterate that I had an alibi, asking them to verify with my company. However, they were reluctant to release me, and my anxiety grew.
What would be my motive? Why would I push Ben's wheelchair? Could be for the insurance money, or to have all the property to yourself. I would never do something this stupid just for that.
No matter what I said, the police officer wouldn't believe me, and the clock's hands just kept moving forward meaninglessly. After a while, suddenly, Emma came to visit me at the police station. A woman in her 50s who looked a lot like her was with her. Apparently, this was Emma's mother.
I'm really sorry for coming out of the blue. And I'm really sorry.
Unlike the usual Emma, she began to apologize abruptly with a face that looked like she was about to cry. I was so surprised that I couldn't even speak.
I just got a call from the owner, hearing that you were taken by the police. I consulted with Mom. We came here to clear name and claim your innocence. What do you mean?
Then Emma started explaining everything, which roughly went like this. Emma had started dating Ben a few years ago and gradually fell for him. Ben, too, became serious about his relationship with Emma, saying,
"I'll divorce and eventually, so please wait for me."
However, even after 2 or 3 years, there was no progress, and Ben showed no signs of divorcing. So Emma told him they should break up and she would quit the shop, to which he replied yesterday, "I've thought of a good method," he said.
"A good method?" "Yes. That's about today's incident."
The plan was to first make his wheelchair fall in a ditch on a deserted roadside, claim to the police and the ambulance that someone had made him fall. And when I arrived, and is the criminal, he would tell the police, and in my confusion, demand a divorce and compensation. Of course, I was against it because it was impossible, but the owner said you were weak to pressure, so it would be fine. Moreover, after the divorce, we could get married and use the compensation money for a trip. I felt dizzy. In other words, Ben was staging a self-directed drama involving the police and hospital to divorce me. This even surprised the young police officer who was listening by my side. It's originally my fault for having an affair with the owner. It's also my fault for not stopping the owner even though I knew about this plan. I've wrongfully accused you, Anne. I'm truly sorry. I was shocked to have been cheated on, and indeed, I was dumbfounded. Somehow regaining my composure and facing Emma, I clearly and slowly told her,
"Emma, I appreciate you telling me about Ben's plan. But what you did can't be easily forgiven. Do you understand that?"
"Yes, I understand." Emma looked me in the eye and answered firmly. Indeed, she seemed like a tough girl. Afterward, the 2 police officers who had brought me in changed their expressions upon hearing Emma's testimony and went out to question Ben. And a few hours later, he was arrested for making false statements to the police and causing disorder in their operations.
"Why has it come to this?"
He was complaining when he came to the police station, but I thought it was his responsibility and didn't feel like defending him even when we were both being questioned. That day, I was the only one released, and I went home with Emma. Eventually, Ben avoided jail time by paying a fine, but in a small town, rumors spread quickly, and several regulars canceled their reservations. Customers decreased, and eventually, the shop had to close. Having lost his credibility, he couldn't find a job as a hairdresser in his hometown. As for me, I decided that I couldn't continue with someone who tried to frame me and immediately presented him with divorce papers to leave. Until the end, Ben refused to sign the divorce papers, saying,
"You're all I have. Can't you reconsider the divorce?"
He said that, but I coldly pointed out his affair with Emma. "You've been telling Emma for years that you'd divorce me, right? You really wanted to divorce, didn't you? Now is the time, isn't it?" Then Ben turned pale and said,
"It's not like that. It's a misunderstanding."
Thinking about it, maybe his relationship with Emma was just a game to him, but I couldn't help feeling a bit of sympathy for her. Afterward, Emma submitted her resignation to Ben, told him they were done, and moved to a different place right away. Between us, she stopped by my place just before moving to give me her new address. And I'm really sorry for the trouble I've caused. This is my new address. Please send the claim for the compensation here. She had prepared herself to do all this. Knowing how briskly and cheerfully she used to serve customers in the shop only made my heart ache more. I took the envelope Emma handed me. Understood. I nodded. I wonder what she felt all these years being with me. I wanted to ask her something mean, but the thought was too frightening, and I never could bring myself to ask. Emma, take care, okay? That was all I could manage to say. Emma nodded with tearful eyes and left. I haven't seen her since then. As for Ben, by that time, we were separated, and he was living a part-time life alone. He persistently sent me messages updating me on his life, trying to evoke sympathy, but I continued to ignore those messages with a firm stance. Eventually, through a lawyer, the divorce with Ben was finalized, and I nearly ended up paying compensation, but instead, I was the one to receive it. It was exactly $30,000. Ben's debt ballooned as he struggled to pay this, ending up in financial trouble. He already had debts from closing the beauty salon and its procedures. Now, he started doing multiple part-time jobs to pay them off. Regarding Emma, the lawyer asked,
You could claim compensation from her as well. What would you like to do?
I was hesitant for a long time. Being betrayed was certainly a shock, and knowing that Ben grew cold towards me because of her made me angry. However, for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Maybe she, too, wanted the affair to be exposed somewhere deep down, having energetically worked as the shop's chief and supported Ben, and even during the moments at the police station and our farewell. Maybe she wanted to end the relationship but couldn't. This is just my speculation, and I know it sounds naive. But still, I felt it would be cruel to claim compensation from her, so I told the lawyer,
I won't claim anything from Emma. I'm grateful for her support of my husband's shop and for helping me at the police station.
The lawyer, in a businesslike manner, merely replied,
Is that so?
And looked at another document. I received the compensation from my ex-husband and have since thrown myself into work and my hobby, bodybuilding, with renewed vigor. My bosses and colleagues were surprised by the divorce, but I wasn't pitted strangely and have been able to return to my calm daily life as before. It's been several weeks since the divorce chaos and compensation claim procedures. On a cool holiday morning and evening, while organizing my chest, the envelope with the new address given by Emma appeared. I had completely forgotten about it since finishing the conversation with the lawyer.
I don't need this anymore.
I put strength into the middle of the envelope, tearing it in half, then tore it into smaller pieces and threw it away. I haven't been in touch with her since, but I wonder if she's still working as a hairstylist somewhere. Glancing at the mirror, I noticed my hair had grown longer since the last time she cut it. Thinking it was about time to get a haircut again, I tapped the screen of my mobile phone to search for a beauty salon. One day, I got a call from Dad, who lives on his pension.
Thanks for sending $30 every month. It helps with the cat's food.
What?
I've been sending $1,000 a month.
Without missing a beat, I replied, and Dad, sounding puzzled, said,
Huh?
And then silence fell. I quickly checked the automatic transfer set up for Dad and pulled out my debit card to review the transactions. To my shock, the details revealed something astounding. That's when I finally understood the root of it all. It was the moment my decade-long trust in Timothy completely shattered.
Give me back all my money, now.
I confronted Timothy as soon as he got home, but he just played dumb and was utterly unhelpful. However, his attitude fully opened my eyes. I was determined to expose his true colors and bring everything to light. As I glared at him, avoiding his provocations, he seemed to realize I was up to something and his expression turned serious. My name is Lily. I've had a dream since I was a child. To become an astronomer and unravel the mysteries of the universe. Though not particularly good at studying, I excelled in science and math, leading me to choose a science-focused high school and later, a faculty of science and engineering in college. During my college years, I engaged in various experiments, observations, and research with my professor, and my only career choice post-graduation was a research institute. However, I soon faced a harsh reality. Unfortunately, a research career alone wasn't enough to live on, so I ended up working at a regular company, becoming an employee. Here, I used my knowledge to get ahead of my peers, and that's where I met Timothy. He was 4 years my senior, holding a section chief position at the time. Mature and guiding, I was drawn to Timothy and initiated the relationship, leading to a smooth married life. We were blessed with 2 children, Donald and Sophia. Now, Donald is 18 and a senior in high school, while Sophia is 16 and a freshman in high school. Both attend schools far from home and live in dormitories. So, it's just Timothy and me now, like before the kids were born. I was 27 when I had Donald, and I left my job then. It was possible to continue working, but having seen the struggles of balancing work and motherhood among my colleagues, I knew how hard it was. Timothy said he'd help, but he wasn't very attentive during my pregnancy, and he even missed the birth, citing a welcome party for new employees. No, to be precise, he showed up after Donald was born, red-faced and in high spirits. At that moment, I felt nothing but disgust. So, when Timothy said, "Don't worry. I'll support you too, Lily. Just focus on your job. We'll share the household and parenting," I could hardly believe him. And that's why I quit, a decision I never regretted. Firstly, Timothy never kept his word. Whenever Donald cried, he'd say, "Hey, he's crying. Smells like a diaper, doesn't it? Oh, and we're out of milk. Maybe you should go buy some?" His eyes were always glued to his mobile phone, not once looking at me or Donald. I couldn't have managed work in that state. The area we live in has fierce competition for daycare, and it's tough for working families to get a spot for kids under a year old. It's easier to get in from the toddler group, so I plan to return to work around that time. 2 years after Donald, Sophia was born. Even with Donald entering the terrible 2s and Sophia being a newborn, Timothy still left all the housework to me.
Hey, can't you help out a bit? Like, at least going to the store for diapers or milk?
I'd ask, but Timothy would always respond,
"That's a mother's job, right? I'm the breadwinner of this family, earning our living. Let me relax at home, will you?"
Friends often told me to divorce him in such a situation, but if it were that easy, I would have done it long ago. If we didn't have a mortgage or car loans, and if we didn't have children, I'm sure I would have divorced such a husband without a doubt. But the environment still isn't easy for single mothers raising children. There are plenty of companies that outright refuse to hire you if you have kids. I know this because a friend of mine hit that wall and now, she and her 3 kids are on welfare. The more I thought about it, the more my feelings for Timothy cooled. If he sees himself just as a provider, then I'll think of him that way too. But I didn't want to make the kids feel bad, so I tried to keep a calm home environment without any arguments. Once the kids were older and things settled down, an acquaintance offered me a job as a teacher and a researcher at a vocational school. I was happy to finally pursue my dream of being a researcher, using the knowledge and experience from my corporate days. But Timothy didn't seem too pleased when I told him about it. The reason was simple. He was jealous that I would be earning more than him.
You know, women are in a tough spot in society without a man. And yet, here you are, showing off. Can't you even consider your husband's feelings a little?
I had an inkling, but Timothy was too proud of himself and was a bit frightened of women doing better than him. He was often harsh with the kids as well, and I had to step in to defend them. But I needed to work too, to save at least enough to send our 2 kids to college. I tried convincing him, but Timothy was just sarcastic about me working, and that's when our relationship really started to sour. Finally, when I was settled in my job and had a stable income, I brought up the subject with Timothy.
Look, I don't think there's any point in us being a couple anymore. It's not good for the kids or us, right? So, I want a divorce.
At this point, I had a decent income and the kids were more independent, so even without Dad, we could manage. I understand that divorce isn't great for kids. But I started to doubt whether me enduring everything was truly for their benefit. However, Timothy flat out refused to divorce and even said,
"Having both parents is definitely better for raising kids. Kids from divorced families tend to behave badly, don't they?"
His basis for saying this was unclear. Probably just an excuse to guilt trip and keep me tied down. Still, I couldn't say everything Timothy said was wrong. Having both parents together is indeed better. That would be an undeniable fact. Kids are pure creatures, for better or worse. If any of their friends found out about our divorce, they might ask out of curiosity. I might be okay, but Donald and Sophia could get hurt. So, even when Timothy spouted his nonsensical theories, I couldn't talk back and ended up not being able to divorce. That's when I decided to change my perspective. Timothy might not be a great husband or father, but he's never cheated and he provides for the family. He also doesn't have any expensive hobbies and only spends about $20 a month on mobile games. He never gambles and even pays for the kids' activities. In that regard, I had no complaint. But his actions and words were often too much. To Donald, who he saw as his heir, Timothy would say things like,
"Listen, Donald. A man should earn as much as he can. Don't ever become a part-time worker. That's just laziness. You should earn more than women and be like me. You're going to be taking over the family, so be aware of that."
Our family doesn't even have any grand achievements or history of being landowners. According to my mother-in-law, our ancestors were just ordinary farmers. So, fortunately, there were no complaints or weird theories from the in-laws towards Donald. But with Sophia, Timothy taught her unbelievable things.
"Sophia, listen. Women can only survive in this society by getting married. So once you graduate high school, work and contribute to the family, support your brother."
I've never met anyone who differentiated between men and women like this before. Thinking that this person is my husband made me feel indescribable. It's an anachronism at its finest. Every time Timothy lectured the kids like that, no matter how much I negated his outdated ideas, the stubborn Timothy never changed his mind. Maybe because of that, by the time Donald entered middle school, he was rebellious and often clashed with Timothy. Sophia, on the other hand, would go out with me but refused to go anywhere if Timothy was coming along. Timothy, of course, seemed not to care. As the kids grew and left home for high school, the brunt of Timothy's nitpicking shifted back to me. He accused me of looking down on him as a husband because I had a research job, or of acting superior despite his college being overwhelmingly more prestigious than mine. Sometimes, he would even talk about my earnings to others, playing the pitiful husband, as if it was all my fault. I never once belittled Timothy for his education or job, yet he would put himself down and talk as if I were the one saying those things. Ignoring his antics led to him calling me a foolish wife for not listening to her husband. The only silver lining was that the kids weren't around to witness this. Thinking he would agree to a divorce once they were independent, I decided to endure a few more years. Then one day, I got a call from Dad. Since Mom had passed away, my 66-year-old dad was living a modest life on his pension and savings, far away. He's always been frugal, never indulging in luxuries, except for adopting a few cats a year ago. There shouldn't have been anything unusual. Usually, he only called about the kids or for my birthday. But today, out of the blue, he called and said something unbelievable.
"Thanks for the $30 you send every month. It helps with the cat food."
I couldn't help but respond.
"What? I've been sending $1,000 a month?"
Then Dad, sounding puzzled, said,
"Huh?"
And silence ensued between us. What was Dad talking about? I reorganized my thoughts and reiterated to Dad.
"I've been transferring $1,000 to your account every month. So what do you mean by $30?
After hearing me out, Dad asked me to wait and then sent a photo of his transactions through SMS. Seeing the photo, I was dumbfounded. Indeed, as Dad said, my remittances were just a mere $30. I couldn't understand what was happening, but it was clear something sinister was going on beneath the surface. "Dad, I'll see what I can find out here. I'll contact you as soon as possible, so please wait a little longer." I quickly ended the call. First, I pulled out the debit card I used for Dad's automatic transfers and checked the transactions. The details were shocking. That's when I finally realized the root of it all. It was the moment my years-long trust in Timothy completely crumbled. As soon as Timothy got home,
Give me back all my money, now.
I confronted him. But Timothy just played dumb, utterly unresponsive. Even worse, he joked that I was spouting nonsense and suggested I go to a hospital. I didn't realize I was so belittled that it gave me a huge shock. But at the same time, it also woke me up. I was determined to expose his true colors and unearth everything. As I glared silently, refusing to rise to Timothy's provocations, he seemed to realize I was up to something and suddenly turned serious. I slammed the debit card I had been investigating onto the table in front of Timothy. Seeing it, Timothy's frown deepened. Nonetheless, I declared,
This is the account I set up to automatically transfer $1,000 on payday. I don't use it normally, and the debit card is kept in the bedroom drawer.
Timothy couldn't say anything, just glared at me in silence. After a few tens of seconds of silence, Timothy finally began to make excuses.
Well, that's definitely strange, but even if I had been diverting it, what benefit would that be to me? Besides, you're suspecting me, but there's no proof I did it, right?
Innocent until proven guilty.
Don't you even know that?
His infuriating way of speaking irked me, especially because he had a point. He's probably smarter than me, and his cunning works just as well. If he was the type to slip up under questioning, I would have divorced him and raised the kids on my own long ago. I don't know how many times I've been frustrated by Timothy's unnecessarily sharp mind. And indeed, there's no direct evidence of Timothy doing anything. But in this house, it's just me and Timothy. Even without evidence, it's a given that Timothy is behind this. I pointed out the discrepancy in the transaction history and said,
Normally, if the transfer date I set falls on a weekend or holiday, I have it set to transfer in advance. The setting is to automatically transfer $1,000 to Dad's account on the 1st of every month. Since payday is the 25th, I'd transfer $1,000 to this account as soon as my salary was deposited.
I paused there, looking at Timothy, who seemed a bit tense. I didn't know what he was thinking, but he might be preparing an excuse for whatever I'd say next. I looked back at the debit card and continued.
So if the 1st is on a weekend or a holiday, it transfers on the 30th or 31st of the previous month. Therefore, there should be no movement of money between the 25th and 29th. Yet, the day after I put in $1,000, only $30 is sent to Dad, and the rest is withdrawn. Doesn't it seem strange that there's movement other than the automatic transfer?
Timothy stuttered for a moment, but then retorted with a laugh. Even if that's true, so what?
Where's the proof that I took your debit card and withdrew the money? Even if I took nearly $1,000, what would I use it for?
He had an infuriating smirk and a condescending laughter to go with it. I just stared at Timothy's face without saying a word, and thinking he had one, he suddenly became talkative.
I earn decently and am not in need of money, something you, who gets the household expenses, should know best, right? And besides, I couldn't mess with those auto-transfer settings anyway. You know, as a researcher, you should be smarter than this.
After rattling off his words, Timothy seemed pleased with himself, as if he had outsmarted me, and happily went to take a bath. Thinking he had beaten me in this exchange, Timothy must be really naive. Just the thought of his smug face falling apart made me want to laugh. Since he thought he had won, Timothy sang some indistinct song in the bath. And when Timothy came out, still in high spirits, I greeted him with the biggest smile. He looked surprised.
What now? You still have something to say?
And stepped back. I presented him with a printout of my SMS history.
What's this?
I asked sharply, and Timothy froze. In fact, when Dad sent the photo of the debit card, I was surprised to find unfamiliar SMS exchanges before it. I rarely use SMS. And when I do, it's mostly for login confirmation codes. I usually communicate with colleagues, friends, and kids via free messaging apps or SNS messages. That's why I hadn't noticed these exchanges, and Timothy must have cleverly chosen SMS for this reason. A conversation between Dad and me from about 10 months ago that I didn't recognize. The messages were sent under my name, but I wasn't the one who wrote them or talked to Dad. Needless to say, it was Timothy.
Hey, this is you identifying yourself, right? This is Timothy, Lily's husband. How are you? Why did you contact Dad from my SMS? If you wanted to talk to him personally, you could have just asked me directly for his contact, right?
As I pressed him with a smile, Timothy's triumphant expression disappeared, replaced by panic.
No way, you don't use SMS, how did you find out?
He was clearly flustered. His reaction made it obvious he had tampered with my mobile phone to contact Dad.
Let's see, what's this? Actually, Lily is hospitalized and needs money, so we can't send you the usual amount. But we know you have cats, so we thought at least we could help with the cat food. We'll have to reduce the amount, but we'll continue sending.
I read the message aloud in a monotone, and Timothy started to apologize.
There's a deep reason for this. I wasn't trying to hurt you or Dad. Just believe that, please.
He briefly apologized, then began to explain. He knew that I sent $1,000 every month to Dad and had agreed to it. But suddenly, Timothy needed money and thought of using this $1,000. Since he didn't have Dad's contact details, he couldn't ask him directly, and even if he did, there was no way he could ask him to slide the $1,000 over to him. So, Timothy pretended that I was sick to gain Dad's sympathy and understanding. He knew how to unlock my phone and probably sent that SMS while I was in the bath. Dad, being kind, must have believed that SMS. The reason I didn't get any worried calls from Dad was also Timothy's doing. He had told Dad that my treatment was tough and I needed some space. So for the past 10 months, Dad hadn't contacted me. Today he must have called because enough time had passed, and he chose a neutral topic like cat food.
You can't get away with this anymore. It's been 10 months, so you've stolen almost $10,000 from me. Give it back to me right now.
I demanded, but Timothy broke down, saying it was impossible. He had already spent it all, paying off a secret debt. After calming down, I asked Timothy, "Can I trust you?" He nodded earnestly. Looking at him, I warned,
"If you betray me again, I'll seriously come after that $10,000. You better be prepared."
Timothy nodded, trembling. He probably thought the conversation had ended there, and he appeared utterly relieved. Recently, Timothy had been extra nice, coming straight home without detours, even bringing home some cake from my favorite bakery. Though I couldn't believe how unaware he was of his own suspicious behavior, I had been quietly working on something else. When the time was right, Timothy was in for another shock. One day, as he came home in a good mood, I pointed to the living room table. Confused, Timothy looked and froze. There, filled out with my details, was a divorce application form.
What's this? We already settled the previous matter, right? I told you I'd start paying you back gradually. Lily, you forgave me, didn't you?
He said with a forced smile. I laughed derisively, like Timothy used to, and declared,
"Did you really think that was the end?"
Timothy, looking distraught, didn't answer, so I pulled out several documents from a drawer. Seeing them, he turned pale and let out a small scream.
"So, you cheated, got her pregnant, and instead of marrying her, you agreed to pay child support. I'm astounded by your shamelessness."
Timothy never seemed to be in financial trouble, let alone needing to borrow money. I've been funding our children's education entirely, planning to use Timothy's earnings for living expenses and our retirement. Even though I earn a decent amount now, Timothy, as a department head at his company, should be making a good salary too. It was baffling why he would need to borrow money. My woman's intuition told me he was either funding an affair, a club, or someone else. Being someone who acts immediately upon deciding, I hired an internet detective for this situation. The detective provided photos of Timothy occasionally visiting a woman and handing her money. Further inquiries revealed she's a single mother now, raising a child.
So basically, you were giving her child support monthly as hush money to keep her from spilling about the affair. But she demanded $2,000, including living expenses. Thinking $2,000 was too much, you had the $1,000 I sent to Dad and stole it, right?
I stated calmly, and Timothy collapsed on the spot, making excuses.
It's not like that. It wasn't my intention. I don't deserve to end like this. Why is this happening to me?
Seeing Timothy like that, I sighed and simply asked him to sign the divorce papers. Timothy clung to my legs and pleaded.
Please, don't divorce me. I can't imagine what others would think of me at this age. And the kids might not want to see me anymore. I can't stand it. It's too hard. Please, I'm begging you.
I refused with a smile, saying,
If you don't sign, I'm fine with taking this to court.
Realizing he had no chance, Timothy signed with trembling hands. But this wasn't the end. The other woman needed to be punished too. Just asking for alimony in the divorce court seemed too lenient. She ruined my marriage and was now setting back, receiving benefits and allowances. Just thinking about it made me furious. There was still one suspicious point about the automatic transfer. I understood how Timothy was using my debit card and PIN to withdraw the money. Since we are a married couple, we shared a PIN. Money can be withdrawn just by using a debit card, and after hearing what he had been using the money for, Timothy's actions made sense. But what about the automatic transfer? Actually, I once misunderstood the remittance date and forgot to deposit money. I was glad that a polite bank employee contacted me and noticed, but this time I didn't hear from them for 10 months. Considering the previous response, I found it strange that I hadn't heard anything from them for 10 months, so I checked with my bank to see what was going on with my automatic remittances. When I checked with the bank, the transfer was somehow already cancelled. It couldn't have been done without me, and Timothy attempting it would have led to them contacting me. So, there was only one explanation. There's someone working with Timothy at the bank. That was the only way this whole thing could make sense. And so it goes without saying that Grace, a 29-year-old bank employee, was Timothy's mistress. Grace must have posed as assisting Timothy with general procedures while actually canceling my transfer. That's a clear crime. As a bank employee, she committed a crime by using her position for personal gain. Further investigation on Grace led me to an unexpected discovery, and I couldn't help but quietly fist pump. Later, I summoned both Grace and Timothy to present them with the alimony claim for the divorce court.
Since you both complied with today's summons, I'll take it as an admission to the affair. All evidence is gathered, I said.
Timothy nodded meekly, looking pale, while Grace was absorbed in admiring her nails, as if this matter was of no concern to her. She probably thinks Timothy will cover her part, so this discussion means nothing to her. This wasn't a place for a child, so she presumably made some vague excuse and left her child with her parents. Timothy was already pretty beaten up from the divorce crisis and the bail claim for the divorce trial, so I decided to let it be for now and turn to Grace, saying,
By the way, you're applying for child support allowance as a single parent from the municipality, right? I see you've also applied for a single parent allowance at the bank. But you're receiving $2,000 from Timothy every month, aren't you? You know that's a crime, right? And may I add, it's also a crime to unilaterally cancel my automatic transfers.
Then Grace's face twisted in shock and I couldn't help but laugh to myself. She seemed to be making excuses, saying she didn't know anything about it, but I was certain because the detective had investigated into it.
If this information is wrong, then let's call your colleague right now to verify. It might also be a good idea to ask the municipality about the conditions for receiving child support allowance and whether you qualify or not.
At that, Grace changed her attitude and apologized to me, begging.
Please, it was just a moment of madness. I never planned to marry this man, that's why I backed off. Please don't push me and my child any further.
I was about to explode with anger at Grace, who acted as if I were the villain. The real victim in this case is undoubtedly me, and if anything, it's Grace's child who's been caught up in all this. Under no circumstances will the victims be these cheaters. Then Timothy started to defend Grace, who looked like she was about to cry. Stop it already. Grace didn't mean any harm. Seeing Timothy like that, I snorted. He didn't seem to understand why he was being laughed at, but I wondered what kind of face he would make when he finally reached the last truth. Still laughing, I said,
So you'll say she didn't mean any harm even after hearing that she made you pay child support and living expenses for a child that's not even yours?
Then Grace stood up, eyes wide open and cutting me off.
Stop it! No more!
But Timothy, showing his pointless intelligence, went on and asked,
Wait, so, that child isn't mine?
Grace's face twisted, and Timothy seemed clueless. The detective had found out that Grace was getting money by claiming another man's child as Timothy's, and she was also receiving $500 a month in child support from the child's real biological father. It cost quite a bit to find all this out, but I think it was worth it to gain something much bigger. Timothy, who thought he had a perfect life, is now facing hell, and I'm sure now Grace will be joining him too. I was feeling great, but Timothy and Grace's aura was dark and heavy. But it's their own responsibility. If they can't differentiate between right and wrong, someone needs to make them realize it. Though it cost them, they finally came to understand the gravity of their actions. After getting their signatures on the divorce trial bail claim and other documents, I triumphantly submitted the divorce application, and Timothy became a stranger. I only told our children living far away that we were getting divorced, but they, being perceptive, said they were on Mom's side. I had told them they didn't need to come home for the holidays, thinking they wouldn't want to see Dad, but as soon as they heard about the divorce, they came home on the next big holiday. They didn't ask what happened, but seemed relieved when I said I got custody. I'll continue to provide for their education, and I had actually made some investments since I didn't fully trust Timothy. I believe I'll be okay in my old age. As for Timothy and Grace, they ended up with an unimaginable fate. Timothy, now divorced at this age, apparently faced rampant rumors at work. Originally belittling me, his wife, and speaking ill of female employees, he was now the subject of gossip about affairs and losing his wife's favor. Eventually requesting a department change, he was surprisingly demoted to a regional office. But Timothy didn't complain, realizing he had no place at the headquarters anymore. Moreover, he's now struggling financially due to the nearly $10,000 repayment and divorce trial bail he promised, as well as the children's education costs that he must fulfill as his parental duties. And as for Grace, she resigned voluntarily after the bank found out about what she had done. She avoided being sued by immediately returning the deceitfully obtained allowances, but lacking enough money to live, she reluctantly returned to her parents' home. After spilling everything to her parents, she faced severe reprimands. Currently, Grace works as a contract employee at the company where her dad works, with her parents managing all her finances, leaving her with no spending freedom. Her parents, being very sincere people, paid the full amount of the bail I had claimed in the divorce trial. Though they had initially fronted the money, it was good to hear they would bill it all to Grace. So, after all that, now several years had passed since the divorce. Donald has advanced to graduate school and landed a job at a major company, and Sophia, incredibly, got into medical school and is now preparing for the national medical exam next year. Even without Timothy, the kids have proudly followed their own paths, and they've even assured me they'll support me in my old age. I couldn't ask for better allies. It's incredibly gratifying to see my children grow up into great human beings, without Timothy's influence, and they are the treasures of my life.